The stars of the Vaya homeworld glimmered cold and sharp against the black void, 1,000 points of light watching as one human ship descended toward the alien capital. It was not a warship. No cannons bristled on its hull. No escort trailed behind. It was only a single vessel carrying a single man. His name was Daniel Hale. Ambassador, envoy, messenger of peace. The galaxy had waited months for this meeting. The humans and the Vaya had shared an uneasy peace for years, a peace written in words, not in trust. The Vaya were old, proud, and cruel. Their empire had existed long before humanity climbed down from its trees. To the Vaya, humans were young, noisy, and reckless. But humans were also expanding quickly, too quickly, and so the Vaya had agreed to talks. This day was meant to be history, a chance to build bridges instead of burn them, a chance for two peoples to avoid war. Daniel knew the weight of that burden. As he stepped down from his ship, his heart beat steady, but not calm. He was young for a diplomat, only in his 30s, but he had earned respect for his courage. He spoke plainly, without fear, even to those who towered above him. Humanity had chosen him for that reason. The Vaya palace rose before him, vast and terrible. Great black towers spiraled upward like claws, scraping at the clouds. The walls shimmered with symbols carved from stone older than Earth's nations. Alien banners fluttered in the wind, crimson, gold, and black, showing the wings of a predator that was their crest. And waiting at the gate were the Vaya guards. Tall, scaled beings, armored in plates of silver, their eyes unblinking. They carried weapons longer than Daniel's body. They did not speak. They only opened the doors. The crowd outside the palace was silent. Journalists, off-worlders, citizens of other species, all watching. Holo cameras floated above, capturing every step. This moment was being broadcast across the stars. Daniel paused at the threshold, taking a slow breath. He remembered his orders. You are not just one man. You are humanity. Every word, every gesture will echo across worlds. He nodded once to himself and walked inside. The great doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The crowd outside waited. Minutes passed. 10 minutes. 20. The cameras kept rolling. The silence grew heavy. Something was wrong. Then, at last, the doors opened again. But it was not Daniel who stepped out. A single Vaya official emerged, tall and cruel-faced, his scales glinting under the alien sun. He raised one clawed hand for silence, though the crowd was already hushed. His words were simple, and they struck like a blade. The human envoy resisted our authority. He is dead. Gasps spread through the audience. Disbelief. Shock. Dead? A diplomat? Killed inside the palace walls? The Vaya official spoke again, his voice like ice. Return to your world. The talks are ended. And then he toned, and the palace doors closed once more. The silence outside broke into chaos. Reporters shouted. Off-worlders fled. Some cried out in anger, others in fear. But the humans who had come to watch, they stood frozen, pale with horror. Daniel Hale was dead. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Human colonies received the message first. Then Earth. Then the fleets. Then the entire network of worlds. And everywhere, the same reaction. Disbelief, then rage. Humanity had lost soldiers before. Yes, they had lost explorers to the void, miners to accidents, pioneers to harsh planets. But this was different. Daniel had not been a soldier. He had not carried a weapon. He had come with empty hands and open words. He had come in trust. And the Vaya had killed him. The governments of Earth tried to remain calm. They held meetings, councils, emergency sessions. They tried to find a path that did not lead to blood. But the people did not wait. In crowded bars, in city streets, in the silence of ships drifting between the stars, the same words were spoken again and again. They killed one of ours. And then, the whisper that followed, a whisper that grew into a vow. Now we will come for everything they have. The Vaya did not understand. They believed humanity weak, divided, too young to stand against them. They thought this murder would teach fear. They did not know that it would unite a species like never before. For the Vaya had made one mistake. They thought a single human life was small. They did not yet understand the truth. To humanity, one life was everything. And for Daniel Hale, for the envoy who never came back from the palace, humanity would burn their civilization to ash. The Vaya Empire had grown strong by believing in one truth. The young never defeat the old. For thousands of years, they had ruled the stars. Species rose and fell beneath their wings, their banners, their claws. To them, humanity was nothing new, just another noisy, ambitious people who would either bend to the empires or be broken beneath it. So when news spread that the human envoy had been killed, the Vaya did not expect danger. They expected submission. They expected humans to bow their heads and beg for forgiveness. Instead, they received silence. For the first few days, the galaxy held its breath. On the human networks, messages poured out in millions. Justice for Daniel. Never again. Remember the envoy. Yet Earth's leaders said little. The great human councils met in long, secret sessions. Some urged diplomacy, others warned of war. The Vaya laughed. They saw hesitation. They mistook patience for weakness. The High Council of the Vaya held a gathering in their shining chambers. One elder, his scales bright with gold, hissed to the others, "The humans will do nothing. They are children. They cannot fight an empire." Another replied, his eyes glowing in the dim light, "Let them protest. Let them cry. Their voices mean nothing. They will return to their markets and their farms. In time, they will forget." And the council agreed. They believed the matter finished. But far across the stars, in the cold mining towns of the asteroid belts, in the busy ports of Earth's colonies, in the quiet fields of distant farms, humanity did not forget. A strange thing began to happen. Old rivalries faded. Nations that had once stared at each other across oceans of distrust now spoke as allies. Colonists from Mars and Luna, from Titan and Europa, from the wild frontier worlds, they all began to move with one purpose. Everywhere, the same word spread, justice for Daniel. And in those words was something more powerful than any fleet or weapon. Unity. The Vaya did not see it. They did not understand. They were used to ruling over species that fractured and fought among themselves. But humans were different. They argued, yes. They fought, yes. Yet when one of their own was taken unjustly, they closed ranks like iron. In a hidden dockyard on Earth, engineers began working without sleep, repairing old warships that had once been mothballed. On Mars, factories turned their forges from tractors to weapons. On Titan, volunteers lined up in numbers greater than the recruiters could count. Even on small colonies with no fleets at all, ordinary people began preparing, training with tools, converting ships, building defenses. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for Daniel. For one life stolen. A whisper spread through the colonies, quiet but unshakable. "We are all Daniel Hale now." The Vaya still laughed. They sent messages to their neighbors, mocking the humans. They called them reckless, fools, dreamers. They warned other species not to stand with Earth, for the Empire would crush them as it had crushed countless others. But in their laughter was arrogance, and in their arrogance was blindness, because the humans did not shout. They did not threaten. They only prepared. In the great chamber of the United Earth Council, the leaders finally gave their answer. No flowery speeches. No declarations of revenge. Only a single broadcast sent to every human system, every colony, every station, every home. One of us was taken. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We are united. The message ended there. Short, cold, final. The Vaya Council received it, and they scoffed. United, they sneered. They cannot even agree on who leads them. What is one life to an empire of trillions? But the galaxy watched. Other species, smaller nations, free worlds, all kept their eyes on humanity, and what they saw disturbed them, because humanity was not shouting. They were not panicking. They were moving, silently, steadily, together, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And though the Vaya did not yet know it, the first winds of that storm were already rising. The Vaya expected nothing. To them, humans were children playing at war. An envoy's death was a warning, not a crime. They assumed Earth would send diplomats, perhaps a few ships to posture their borders, and then crawl back into submission. That was how it had always been with the young races. So when human vessels appeared on the edge of Vaya territory, the Empire's commanders laughed. The fleet was small, too small. Barely a dozen ships, worn and patched, no match for the shining war cruisers of the Empire. The Vaya commander on duty, Admiral Kraft, did not even rouse his full force. He ordered a single patrol wing forward. To him, it was an easy show of strength. The battle should have lasted seconds. It lasted 7 minutes. And when it ended, the Vaya patrol wing was gone. Not captured, not disabled, destroyed. The human ships did not fight like the old species. They did not move in predictable lines or obey ancient doctrines of space warfare. They darted like hunters, striking from angles that Vaya had never considered. They used asteroid shadows as cover, ignited mining lasers as weapons, and overloaded their own reactors to fuel attacks no sane admiral would attempt. To the Vaya, it was chaos. To the humans, it was strategy. Admiral Kraft, stunned, ordered his full fleet to engage. He expected the humans to flee. They did not. Instead, the human commander, a quiet woman named Captain Yura, transmitted a single message across the battle net, clear for every Vaya ship to hear. You killed one of ours. This is a beginning. Then her fleet moved. The second clash was faster, more brutal. The Vaya ships, larger and slower, found themselves outmaneuvered. Human vessels slipped between their lines, cut supply ships first, then tore at their engines. When the Vaya tried to bring their heavy weapons to bear, the humans were already gone, striking from behind, above, below. By the end of the day, Admiral Kraft's fleet, one of the proudest along the border, no longer existed. The humans had taken their first system. The news spread like fire across the galaxy. Other empires, other peoples, watched in disbelief. A species barely a century into the stars had just broken the fleets of the Vaya, conquerors of millennia. It should have been impossible, but it had happened, and the whispers began again. Humans are dangerous. On Earth and across the colonies, the victory was not celebrated with cheers or parades. Instead, there was silence, steady and grim. Humanity had struck a blow, yes, but they knew this was only the beginning. The Vaya Empire would not forget. They would not forgive. They would answer with fury, and humanity was ready. The Vaya High Council, however, still did not understand. When word of the defeat reached them, they hissed and spat, enraged. But even then, they dismissed it as luck. A fluke. Children with toys, one elder scoffed. They cannot fight us in open war. They did not see the truth, for the humans were not fighting for conquest. They were not fighting for glory, nor for empire. They were fighting for Daniel Hale. And that made them something the galaxy had rarely seen, a species united not by power, but by principle. As the humans fortified the captured system, they sent one message across the stars, short and sharp. For one life, we will take all. The Vaya received the message, and they laughed once more. They had not yet learned fear. They had not yet learned loss. But they would, because this was only the first blow, and humanity was just getting started. War spreads quickly, but no one expected it to spread this quickly. When the humans struck their first blow, most of the galaxy thought it would end there. A small victory, a flare of anger, then silence. The Vaya themselves were certain of it. They believed that once their true fleets arrived, the humans would scatter like frightened animals. They were wrong. The Vaya struck back, as predicted. Their ships crossed the border and fell upon human colonies, burning worlds and breaking defenses. On the frontier planet of Soren's Reach, the skies filled with fire as Vaya cruisers unleashed their bombardments. Entire cities were wiped away in hours. To the Vaya, this was victory. To them, this was how you break a young species. But the humans did not surrender. The survivors of Soren's Reach did not beg for mercy. They did not scatter into hiding. Farmers turned their harvest machines into armored tanks. Mechanics ripped apart their factories and turned drills into cannons. Even children carried messages and supplies through ruined streets. When the Vaya came down to claim the planet, they found not helpless victims but a human militia waiting in the rubble. The battle lasted weeks. When it ended, the Vaya controlled the ashes, but at a cost so heavy their own commanders hesitated to report it. And that was only one world. Across the colonies, the same story played out. On mining outposts, miners turned asteroid drills into railguns that could punch holes in starships. On water worlds, divers used submersibles to sabotage their engine from below. In orbit, civilian freighters rammed into warships, detonating fuel tanks in desperate sacrifice. Everywhere the Veya turned, they found resistance. Not soldiers, not armies, everyone. It was not a war of empires. It was not fleet against fleet, nation against nation. It was humanity itself, united, burning with a single fury. The Veya commanders were confused. To them, war was a game of numbers, fleets, troops, resources. They measured losses in the thousands, victories in the millions. One life meant nothing. 10,000 lives meant nothing. Civilizations rose and fell on scales too large for compassion. But humans were different. Every fighter carried Daniel Hale with them. Every battle was fought as if he stood at their side. And because of that, they fought with a strength the Veya had never seen. Entire systems began to fall. Human fleets pushed deeper into Veya space. They used clever traps, feigning retreat, luring ships into asteroid fields laced with hidden mines. They launched raids that targeted food convoys, not just war fleets. They struck at fuel depots, supply chains, communications hubs, choking the empire from the inside out. Each victory was small on its own, but together they formed a storm. Fire spread across the stars, not just a destruction, but a rebellion. For the first time in memory, the Veya looked weak. And when the galaxy smelled weakness, old enemies stirred. Small nations who had once feared the Veya began sending quiet aid to humanity, food, weapons, intelligence. Some did it out of pity, some out of vengeance, some out of fear of being the next target. Whatever their reasons, humanity accepted. The tide grew stronger. The Veya High Council raged. They demanded answers from their admirals. They screamed for victories. They wanted to know why this young species had not been crushed. But the admirals had no answers. One spoke, hesitating. They fight differently. They do not fear loss. They do not measure war as we do. The council spat back. Then teach them fair. Burn their worlds until they remember their place. And so the war escalated. Veya fleets fell upon human systems in waves, trying to drown them in fire. And humanity answered with fury, matching fire with fire, sacrifice with sacrifice. Everywhere, the galaxy watched in silence. And everywhere, whispers grew louder. This is not a war of empire. This is a war of vengeance. This is a war for one human life. The Veya had wanted to teach fear. Instead, they had taught unity. Instead, they had taught rage. And now, entire civilizations were learning the truth. When humanity burns, it does not burn alone. It sets the stars on fire. The war had dragged on for months. To the Veya, this was impossible. Against any other foe, it should have been finished in weeks. The humans had no empire, no ancient fleets, no legacy of conquest. And yet, system after system slipped through the Empire's claws. The High Council gathered in fury. Their chamber was carved from stone older than human civilization, its walls glittering with gold, its roof painted with the victories of 1,000 years. There, the elders screamed at one another, their voices echoing through the halls. "How can this be?" one demanded, his scales bristling with rage. "They are young. They are weak." "Perhaps they are simply lucky," hissed another. But luck could not explain the endless defeats. Entire fleets had been lost. Supply lines shattered. Worlds burned. And still the humans advanced. At last, the council summoned those who had fought the humans directly. Broken admirals, scarred soldiers, shaken survivors. Most came in silence, their heads bowed. But one officer, a captain captured by the humans and later traded back in a prisoner exchange, dared to speak. "They are not like us," he said, his voice low. The council scoffed. "They bleed. They die. They burn. They are like all others." "No," the officer insisted. "You do not understand. For us, one soldier loss is nothing. For us, one life means little in the grand scale of empire. But for them," he paused, his eyes haunted. "For them, one life is everything." The chamber fell silent. "They do not fight as armies," he continued. They fight as families, as if the dead still stand beside them. Every ship carries their fallen. Every world they lose becomes a vow to take 10 more in return. You think they fight for conquest, but they fight for a man named Daniel Hale. And because of him, they fight as if he is still alive. The elders hissed in disbelief, but beneath their scorn, fear began to stir. The officer was dismissed, yet his words lingered. Some of the council scoffed louder, insisting it was nonsense. Others, however, shifted uneasily in their seats. They had seen the reports. The humans did not retreat, even when logic demanded it. They did not surrender, even when defeat was certain. They fought with a will that bent the rules of war. And the galaxy was beginning to notice. Other species had once feared the Veya. Now they whispered in secret about the humans. Traders who had once carried goods for the Empire now carried weapons for Earth. Worlds once silent under Veya rule now muttered with rebellion. The tide was turning, not just in battle, but in the stars themselves. Still, the Council refused to see the truth. They ordered greater fleets, more fire, harsher punishments. Their answer to fear was always the same, brutality. But brutality no longer worked. On the colony world of Duskfall, the Veya landed 500,000 troops. They expected an easy conquest. Instead, the planet's miners, farmers, and children fought them street by street, tunnel by tunnel. Entire families fought together, carrying nothing but improvised weapons and ancient rifles. The Veya won the ground, but at a cost so heavy that the survivors whispered among themselves, "Are these humans even mortal?" And far above Duskfall, a human fleet descended, hammering the weakened Veya forces and liberating the planet in a blaze of fire. The message spread everywhere. The Veya could not hold what they took. The council met again, more desperate now. One elder shouted, "They are not fighting us. They are consuming us. If this continues, they will burn our empire to ash." Another, older still, whispered, "Perhaps they already have." For even as the Veya argued, human fleets were pushing deeper, faster, hungrier. Their tactics were not just clever, they were personal. Captains named their ships after fallen comrades. Squadrons swore over the names of the dead. Every battle was a memorial, every victory a grave marker carved in fire. And the galaxy began to understand what the Veya did not. Humanity was not at war for territory. Humanity was at war for memory. The turning point had come, and though the Veya did not yet admit it, they could feel the truth pressing down like a storm they could not escape. They had killed one man, and in doing so, they had awakened all of humanity. The Veya had ruled the stars for millennia. Their fleets had darkened skies. Their banners had flown over 100 conquered worlds. Their name had once been spoken with fear. But now, that name was spoken with something else. Doubt. Rumors ran through the empire like cracks in glass. Entire fleets destroyed. Colonies lost. Supply lines burned. Every system closer to the human frontier whispered the same question. If the humans come here, who will stop them? The High Council still shouted a victory. They painted their failures as strategic retreats, their defeats as delays. They spoke of ancient glory, of strength eternal. But even as they lied to their people, the truth could not be hidden. The humans were coming, and they did not come like other conquerors, announcing their arrival with parades of power. They came like ghosts, silent and relentless. Human fleets slipped into systems under cover of darkness, striking at fuel depots, war factories, and food convoys. Entire planets woke to find their defenses burning before a shot was fired in their skies. The humans gave no speeches. They made no demands. Only once, on an open channel to the Veya homeworld, did a message appear. "We asked for peace. You gave us blood. Now we return the gift." Then the transmission ended, and the killing continued. System by system, the empire shrank. On the industrial world of Morath, workers rose up the moment the human fleet appeared. They overthrew their Veya overseers and lit the factories on fire rather than let the empire reclaim them. On the fortress moon of Keshtar, the Veya garrison fought for weeks, waiting for reinforcements that never came. When at last the humans breached the final bunker, they found the defenders already gone, their weapons abandoned. On worlds once proud with Veya temples and statues, crowds tore down the symbols of empire and trampled them underfoot, whispering a new truth. The Veya are finished. The Empire's leaders refuse to believe it. They call for their final fleets, drawing them back to defend the heart of their civilization. Great armadas fill the skies around their capital world, thousands of ships gleaming in the light of their sun. It was meant to be a wall no enemy could pass. But walls mean nothing when the fire is already inside. The humans did not charge blindly at the armada. They cut off its supply. They struck at the fuel depots, the carriers, the food convoys. They sent swarms of small ships, freighters armed with explosives, scouts carrying improvised torpedoes, to harass the Empire's great war cruisers. Day by day, the armada grew weaker, hungrier, more desperate. And then the humans came in full force. The final battle was not glorious. It was not even close. The human fleets, smaller but faster, tore through the weakened armada with precision strikes. Veya ships fell one after another, burning in the void, their wreckage lighting the darkness like falling stars. Admirals screamed orders that went unanswered. Captains begged for aid that never arrived. By the time the battle ended, the skies above the Veya capital were filled not with their own ships, but with wreckage drifting like a funeral shroud. And then the humans descended. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were brought low. Palaces burned. The towers of the High Council, carved from stone older than Earth itself, crumbled into dust beneath human bombardments. The Empire begged for mercy. They offered surrender, tribute, anything to be spared. But humanity remembered Daniel Hale. The humans did not conquer. They erased. The fall of the Veya was not a single moment. It was a series of endings. Ending after ending, until there was nothing left. Their fleets destroyed. Their cities silenced. Their banners torn down. Their name, once feared across a galaxy, spoken only as a warning. And when it was over, the humans gave the galaxy only one truth. We did not want this war. We wanted peace. But you killed one of us. You thought one life was small. You were wrong. One life is everything. And now your empire is nothing. The Veya civilization, thousands of years old, was gone. Not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly, like a star extinguished in the night. The galaxy trembled. For if humanity would do this for one man, what would they do for more? The Veya were gone. Their fleets shattered, their cities silenced, their banners reduced to ash. An empire that had stood for thousands of years ended not in slow decline, but in fire, and all because of one man, Daniel Hale, a name that echoed across human space like a vow, and across alien space like a warning. For humanity, he became more than an envoy, more than a diplomat. He became a symbol, the man who walked into a palace unarmed, carrying only words, and never walked out again. His death was a spark that united a fractured species, the ember that became a fire, the reason entire civilizations had fallen. Children learned his story in schools, his statue raised in colonies from Earth to the farthest outposts. His name was carved onto the hulls of ships, whispered in the silence before battle, etched into memorials that stood under alien suns. And yet, humans did not speak of him as a martyr. They did not speak of him as a victim. They spoke of him as a reason they remembered, that every life mattered, that no one stood alone. The galaxy, however, remembered differently. For the free worlds, the fall of the Veya was liberation. Traders, miners, small nations once crushed beneath imperial rule celebrated in secret, some openly. They told stories of humanity's fury, of the empire that thought itself eternal and ended in silence. For the cautious empires that still remained, the story was something else. They looked at Earth, at its colonies, at its fleets. They remembered the simple truth humanity had shown them. One life, taken unjustly, could call forth an answer so terrible it could erase civilizations. Whispers filled the void. Do not touch a human. Do not take from them what they love. Do not kill one of their own, unless you are ready to lose everything. It was not a law, not a treaty, not an agreement signed in ink. It was something greater, a shadow written into the memory of the stars themselves. Humans did not ask for tribute. They did not demand subjects. They did not build an empire over the ruins of the Veya. Instead, they returned to their colonies, to their homes, to their lives. But the galaxy never forgot what they had done. Every alien diplomat who came to Earth remembered the ruins of the Veya capital. Every captain who looked upon a human ship remembered the wreckage that had once been an armada. Every child of every world grew up hearing the same story. The Veya took one human life. Humanity took their civilization. And in time, the tale became legend. Long after the Las Veya ruins turned to dust, long after humanity built new cities and reached for new stars, the story remained, told in whispers in alien markets, carved in symbols on forgotten stones, shared by traders across light years. Some told it as a warning, do not provoke them. Some told it as a lesson, even the smallest spark can burn the greatest empire. Some told it as hope. If the humans fight for one of their own, perhaps one day they will fight for us too. But for humanity, the meaning was simple. Every life mattered. Every person was worth the weight of worlds. And no empire, no matter how ancient, could take that truth from them. Daniel Hale had died in silence behind palace doors, but his name outlived the empire that killed him. His story lit the stars with fire. And so the galaxy remembered, not the banners of the Veya, not the boasts of their council, not the cities they had built. Only this: do not take a human life, for humanity will count the loss, and humanity will come for all.